Tree Apple Orchard provides apples to. So if you have an apple at lunch today, it may come directly from this orchard, which is pretty amazing. So we have Mrs. Johnson, second graders from Sunrise Elementary, Dr. Knit, fifth graders, Lewiston Altura, we have Mr. Schmaltz class joining us, Lake Harriet Upper Camp. Wow, that was tricky for my tongue to say. Lake Harriet Upper Campus fourth graders from Mrs. O'Hara's class. Wow, we have a lot of folks with us. I know I'm not going to get to everybody's, but we have first, second, and third graders at Bluffview Montessori. We're excited for you. Mrs. Bonnerup's fourth graders, Albert Lee. Oh my gosh, so many people joining us today. We're so excited to have you either on Zoom. I know some of you are joining on Zoom. There also are some of you joining on YouTube. I just got a note, Mrs. Cragen's fourth graders from Otter Lake, White Bear Lake, another school. The apple orchard is in White Bear Lake. So you guys might, when you're eating apples in your school lunch, they possibly could come directly from this orchard. So I am Sue Knott. I am an education specialist with the Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom program. And two of my teammates, Carrie Seidel is our tech support. So she's going to make sure everything runs smoothly with our technology. And then Jessica Blossberg is out on site at the apple orchard. She's our camera woman and making sure it's all running well. So like I said, we're so excited to have you. And this is our first virtual field trip of the 2022-23 school year. We hope to do them monthly. And we are excited to travel virtually to Pine Tree Apple Orchard. Now, a few tips. We are excited to ask your questions to John Jacobson, who you'll meet in just a moment. If you could put those questions in the Q&A, that would be fantastic. And if it's a particular student, if that student's name could be included, and also the school and grade level, that makes it really helpful so that we can ask those questions. So I see John's warming up his hands and ready to talk to us. So I would like to introduce everyone to John Jacobson. He is one of the owners of the Pine Tree Apple Orchard in White Bear Lake. And John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your orchard to get started?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me today. Thank you, students, for tuning in. And I wish it was a little bit sunny and warmer, but you know, when you're out in the farm, you get what you get, and we've got a very cloudy day. But Pine Tree Apple Orchard was originally planted in 1904, so it's well over 100 years old. So from that time to 1958 is when my father purchased the orchard. So he actually worked at the apple orchard from 1950 to 1958, and then he purchased it. And at that time, he had 4 children. So once he purchased it, then he started to expand the orchard, make it bigger. And originally, it was 25 acres. So within a few years, he actually doubled the size of the orchard to 50 acres. And then he bought another farm down in southern Minnesota, and he raised Red Delicious and Harrelson's and other varieties down there too. So from when he did that, then we had added 2 more children. So I've got a brother and 4 sisters that operate the orchard with me on a daily basis. So we've been all working together since the early 1980s. So it's been a long time that we've all been together, and we all have separate areas that we work in. So I am the grower. I grow all the fruit. And we do grow probably about 15 different varieties of apples on both our farms. Most of the varieties that we do have come from the University of Minnesota. So they're all native to the state, and they're all native to this region. And so we have Harrelson, Honeycrisp, Zestar, Sweet Tango, First Kiss, all great varieties that were developed by the University of Minnesota. So we're very happy to be associated with them and be a tester. So we get to test the varieties before they actually come into commercial production. So we get kind of a sneak peek at what the potential for a variety is going to be like. And so it works out very, very nice.
Okay, John, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. We have our first question. So when did you start working on the farm or the orchard? How old were you?
That's a great question, because my two older sisters and I used to with our wagon, and we would pick apples off the ground, and our dad would give us like a nickel for every wagon load that we had. But basically, I started working on a full-time basis in 1972, and it's been actually it's my 50th anniversary that I would be working for Pine Tree Apple Orchard. So it's been a long time. So over the course of that time, we've seen a lot of technological changes in the apple industry. And one of the things that we really like to do is reduce risk. We're always trying to figure out a way to compensate for anything that Mother Nature may throw at us, whether it be dry weather, like most of us in the Twin Cities, we've had a real dry summer. And it's not beneficial for the trees to go without moisture. So you can see right down here, we have this tube that emits water for the trees so that the trees can get a drink of water every day, or when there's lack of rain, then we can turn on the trickle system and have the trees get a drink of water, which works out very, very nice. And as you look at these trees that we trickle irrigated all summer, you can see that the size of the apples is really quite spectacular. The other thing that you're going to notice with the camera is that this white netting right here. This is to protect the apples from hail. And it seems like over the course of the years, since I've been involved, the storms are getting worse. So develop this netting to the apples, so the hailstone falls, it'll hit the net and it won't hit the apple. So the hailstones will hit that and fall off onto the ground. Now, the other thing that is interesting about the hailing Minnesota is doing
John, can I interrupt you for a second? Your audio is cutting out a little bit, so if you could take a step back to where you started, it was a little stronger there. And we lost your
right
video.
Here. How's that?
That is better. I can hear you, but now I cannot see.
Lost the video. Well, we're life on the prairie.
That's right. Okay, while we get the video back, we did have there we go. We have a couple questions. Kinley in Mrs. Haberman's class,
Sure.
Kinley wants to know how many days it takes for an apple to grow.
That's a real good question. And most varieties are different. Some of the early varieties only take anywhere from 85 to 90 days to grow. And some of our later varieties will take up towards of about 100 to 105 days. So that's a great question. And I know some of the varieties that I've heard of will take actually 180 days to grow, which is like 6 months. So we're very fortunate. Once again, the apples being developed by the University of Minnesota for this area, they all fit within the window of probably blossom time around May 1st and harvest time around Halloween. So there's a window of probably 4 or 5 months in there that the apples actually grow and mature.
Okay, awesome. Well, we can see and hear you both now, which is great. I have a couple more questions, and a lot of them about your trees. So Andrea wants to know how many trees, and another student wants to know what is your oldest tree?
Oh, that's a really a great question. And we have a crab apple tree that's on the property that I am willing to bet is over 100 years old. And after that, then I suppose most of the trees are probably, the oldest ones will probably be in their 80s. But the trees that we're standing around right now, they're probably about 10 to 15 years old. What really happens is that, once again, technology changes and we get new varieties. And so we have to keep current with what's going on so that we plant the newer varieties. And regretfully, we have to take out some of our old friends and move on. So most of the trees in this orchard right now are probably about 30 years old. Now, the answer to the other question is we have probably about 15,000 trees on the property right here. And I have about 15,000 trees at my farm down in southern Minnesota. So all told, there's probably about 30,000 trees that we're raising on a yearly basis.
Awesome. That is a lot of trees. So John, if you want to be adventurous and maybe walk a little bit down, I know you had some
Sure.
harvesting pieces because there was a bunch of questions about, well, first of all, how many apples are on the average tree? And then how do you pick them and when does that happen? So if we want to walk down there, we'll hopefully cross our fingers that we keep good signal.
All right. Well, the most trees, we try and restrict the amount of apples that we have on a tree so it doesn't make the tree too tired. And if we put too many apples on the tree, then what will happen is that we won't have any apples the following year. It takes so much out of that tree to produce a crop of apples for 1 year that it won't produce any fruit buds for the following year. So most trees that we like to have, young trees, maybe under a bushel, which would be about 100 apples. And some of our bigger trees, we may put anywhere from 300 apples on. And some of our really old trees, we may put like 500 or 600 apples on a tree.
Okay, before you tell us what we're looking at, John, I want to ask a question from Xander in Miss O'Hara's class. He wants to know how many apples total. You mentioned, you had all those trees. Do you have an estimate of how many apples you harvest each year?
Oh my God, that would be, on the average, I suppose we harvest probably about, you can help me with the math on this, kids. We harvest about 20,000 bushels at each farm. And if there's about 150 apples per bushel, quickly do the math on that. What is that? 3 million or thereabouts that we harvest, if not more. So it's really a good question. I've never really put a pencil to it to figure it out. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, so I see a ladder. I bet this is what you use to help pick the apples. Do you want to tell us about that?
Absolutely. I'm going to walk over here. And this is when I really started out when I was a young man after high school. Father would have us come out and harvest the crop. And so this is how we do it. We've got a nice picking sack right here. It's open on the bottom. So we put the straps back on. We seal the bottom. And we take it. We make an X. And then we put it on like this. So now it's suspended from my shoulders and I got both hands free. So I'm able to use both my hands to harvest the fruit. So when we come over to an apple tree, this is a Harrelson tree. And incidentally, this variety is over 100 years old. It's had its 100th anniversary this year. So we're very, very, very happy that it's still around. It's a great apple for us. So what we try and do is we just want to try and twist it a little bit up like that. So we keep the stem, because if we don't have the stem, the apple won't keep as long. So then we put it in the bag. We do the same thing. And we just keep on twisting up. And where we go on these big apples, that's kind of hard to hold on to sometimes. They got to be very, very careful.
As you're picking these, you mentioned that they're Harrelson and they look red. And that's been a couple of questions. Eli, for example, wants to know if you grow other colored apples besides red ones.
Absolutely. We have a variety that was developed by the University of Minnesota called Honeygold, and that is yellow. And so it's kind of interesting. Most of the apples are different shades of red, but the Honeygold is a beautiful shade of yellow.
So here's another question. This is from Elin. Elin wants to know that are all apples picked when they're red, or do you pick some early when they're still green?
Most of the time, what we'll do here's a perfect example right here. This apple is red on this side, but if we turn it around, you can see it's a little bit yellow or green. Usually what we like to do is we call this the base color. When the base color starts turning from green to yellow like this, then we know the apple's ready to be harvested. In actuality, too, we'll cut it open and we'll look at the seeds too to make sure that they're nice and brown. So great question. Most apples are picked when they're red.
Okay, here's a question from Victor, and Victor's a second grader joining us all the way from New York. He wants to know how old How old does an apple tree need to be before it produces apples?
Another great question. That is, most often or not, we'll let a tree be in the ground for 3 years. So we plant it. Any blossoms that it may have, we take those, we clip those off with the scissors, and we let the tree grow. The following year, which would be year 2, we'll do the same thing, and then we'll see what the tree looks like. If it's growing well, we may hang a few apples, like maybe 10 or 15 on a tree, just to see what they're like. But usually by year 4 is when we start to put the tree into production and really start to hang more apples on the tree so that we can start to get that variety more accessible to people that want to come out and buy it. So anyway, you can see that.
I'm going to ask you one more question. This is from a really observant student. They want to know, what is the white wrapping around the bottom of the trees?
We have a problem with mice. And so that white wrap is protected. So when the mice in the wintertime, when the mice are looking for food, they'll eat the bark of the tree. But the white wrap protects the rootstock from the mice, and so it survives. And so they don't eat that. So it works out very, very nice. Another very observant student there.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, don't want those mice causing trouble. So this is for Lila, and I think John, this is what you're going to talk about next. Lila from Mrs. Raby's class wants to know, what do you do with the apples after you pick them? So you have them in your basket. What happens next?
You can see that the basket's almost full. So then I come over to the trailer. And I stand up on the trailer, and this one does have some apples already in it. I open the bottom of the bag and let the apples come out into the bin. And it usually takes about 30 to 35 of these full picking sacks to fill the bin up. And then what happens is the apples go down to the building or the storage, and they're put in cold storage. And then as we need them to sell them to the people that come out and buy apples, then we take them out of the cooler and we wash them and we polish them, and then we size them and we look for any defects that they may have. So
we're showing the video right now that is from the apple sorting, I think, that you just mentioned. Do you want to tell us about anything we're seeing here?
Yeah, that is what the apples are on right now is the weight sizer, and it sizes the apple by how much it weighs, and then it drops into different categories. So all apples are the same size in a bag. So it makes it work out a little bit more convenient for people that if the apples are all the same size.
Fantastic. And so who gets to do that job? That was another question. How many people work on the orchard, and what are some of the jobs that they get to do?
Well, there's apple harvesters, then there's apple sorters, then there's people that work, because we're an operation that is vertically integrated, meaning that we take the apple off the tree and we have different homes for it. Some apples, if they're small like this, they may end up in apple cider. If they're a little bit bigger like this, they may end up at your school for you to eat. And if they're really big like this, they'll be in a bag, and we'll put them out and people will buy them. Otherwise, and if they're maybe a little off color like this, we'll peel this and we'll make an apple pie out of it. So we've really got a home for every apple that we raise, which is kind of unique in the industry, and it's very beneficial for us. It makes us kind of unique, and it works out so that we can use every apple that we raise. We have a home for it.
That's awesome. I know Carrie, my colleague, when she visited, I think she got an apple pie both times she was there that fourth time. So she can speak for how good they are. So here's a question for Peyton. He's looking at, or he or she, Peyton could be a boy or a girl, is looking at the bins right next to you. How many apples do you think one of those bins holds?
These bins hold about 20 bushels, small bushels of apples. They're called a 20 bushel bin, and each each bushel probably has about 150 apples in it. So there probably would be about, once again, help me with the math here, kids, 3,000 apples in a bin like this. But of course, if the apple is bigger, there's going to be less. If the apple's small, there's going to be more. So it kind of is varying. It's a kind of a moving target as far as it goes. So, but on the average, there's probably about 3,000 apples in a bushel, and it takes someone probably about a little under an hour to pick one of these. So it's depending upon how big the trees are and how heavy the trees are with apples. It's a great job. Now see the sun's coming out and it's going to be beautiful. So we're excited to be outside today.
Yeah, it looks like a great day at the orchard. So here's a question from Madison Elementary, 4th grade. What do you do with the leftover apple parts after you make pie or cider?
Oh, good. That's a very interesting question. What we do is we take all that and we put it in a compost pile. And then what we do is we let that sit over winter. And then in the springtime, we come in with our buckets and we load up our manure spreader and we spread it all over the pumpkin patch and the strawberry fields, and we reuse it that way. So everything does get used. I mean, we recycle just about everything.
So I heard you just mention pumpkin and strawberries, and we had a couple questions about that. Do you grow anything besides apples? So tell us what else is going on there.
Well, we have a 25-acre strawberry patch that my brother runs, and then we have about 15 acres of pumpkins that we have for pick your own pumpkins. So, and it's pick your own strawberries as well. And it was just a way for my father to diversify our existence here, to have another crop come in. So we weren't always dependent on the apple crop. So we had a strawberry crop, we have a pumpkin crop, and we have an apple crop. So it works out very, very well.
Awesome. Okay, so Ezra has this question along with a few others. What happens, or what do you do with the apple trees in the winter?
What happens is that as you're aware right now, kids, the days are getting shorter. And the apple trees are starting to go to sleep right now as we speak. So they'll go into dormancy probably around
All right, John, we're
the sun
having
gets warmer, they come out of dormancy.
Okay. Thanks, John. You cut out just for a second. So maybe let's make our way back to kind of where we started, where those apples were with the nets over them to protect them from hail. And we've had a bunch of questions about how many different varieties you grow and what is your favorite type of apple. So if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, we grow probably about 15 different types of varieties. And harvest starts usually in about the second week in August, and it goes until almost Halloween. What's my favorite? I guess if I had to say a favorite, because I get to sample an apple a day all the time, so I get to eat a lot of apples. But my favorite right now is Sweet Tango, and that is just a great, juicy, sweet, great textured apple, and it's only been around since 2008, so it's still relatively new.
And I think, John, the Sweet Tango was developed at the University of Minnesota also, right?
Yes, it was actually they took a Honeycrisp apple and they did it with a Zestar apple, and they got Sweet Tango.
Awesome. Well, I like Zestar, Honeycrisp, and Sweet Tango. So lots of different great options. So the kids are also wondering, they said that the trees look relatively short. They're wondering if you have any really tall trees and what your tallest apple tree might be.
Oh, the tallest apple tree that we have is the one that I referred to. That's 100 years old. That's probably about 30 feet tall. Most of the apple trees are short and small because of the speed at which you have to harvest. You know, big trees take a little bit longer to harvest than small trees. So we try and keep the tree as the fruiting surface of the tree as close to the ground as we can, so that there's not a lot of ladder work. And So basically they all kind of look, they got the wide bottom and the very, very narrow tops. And so once again, it helps for light penetration to the interior of the tree to make sure we get a lot of ripe fruit that way.
Okay, here's another question. A couple students want to know, what is the farthest place that you have sent or shipped your apples?
Oh, I think that one time I think we did send a box of apples to Japan. It was probably quite a few years ago, but more often than not, we've sent apples to all the 50 states. And just trying to think, I think we sent some into Canada too, but one that sticks out was that one time that we sent one to Japan, which was a long ways away.
We hope that they were still good and tasted delicious when they got to eat them. All right, John, we just have a couple more minutes, and a few students have wanted to know if you have any worms in your apples, or how do you keep them out, and also if you've ever had raccoons come and eat some of the apples.
I've seen raccoons out here, and they usually what they'll do is they'll eat apples that are already on the ground, which I really don't care if they do that or not. So what's the other part of that question?
About worms, do you ever get worms?
Oh, the worms. Yeah, the worms. That was no, we really don't. We try and monitor. We hang traps in the trees so that we can see if insects are present. So it's called integrated pest management. So we'll hang a trap, and if we catch any bugs in the trap, then we know that the insects are present and we have to do a corrective measure. But if we don't catch any bugs, we don't need to make a corrective measure, and so we don't.
Okay, great. All right, I have two final questions for you. The first one is that Pine Tree Orchard has been around for 100 years. Do you think it will still be around 100 years from now?
Good question. I think so. I think it'll still be here. It's very interesting that we had our other farm down in southern Minnesota was planted in 1896. So that's been around 100 years. I think hopefully that one of my children or grandchildren will carry on with Pine Tree Apple Orchard, and we'll just have to see. You know, it's farming, so there's a lot of variables that are involved with this, and you know, who knows? I hope so. And we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, I hope so too. Here's the final question for you, John, and lots of students have asked this, but I'm curious too. What is your favorite part about being an owner of an apple orchard?
Oh boy, I thought about that because I anticipated that someone was going to ask that. And I just think that it's great in my job and what I do. I'm outside. I'm with Mother Nature all the time. Sometimes she's a friend, sometimes she's a little bit adversarial with us. It's just great. I get to work with my family. I love to do that. And it's just, you know, when you walk on the ground and you see the apples and the trees, it's just great. I mean, it's just a fabulous job. I like they say, if you find a job that you like, you'll never work a day in your life. And I've never worked a day in my life.
Well, that is awesome, John. That's such great advice. And it's so fun to meet you and see your orchard and hear all about the things that you guys are doing to grow those apples that some of the students on this Zoom I get to eat maybe for lunch today. So huge thank you to you, John, for hosting us and for taking time out of your busiest season of the year to show us around the orchard. And thank you all the teachers and students who also joined us this morning. We hope that you learned something. And you know, Pine Tree Apple Orchard is open to visitors, so you can go visit on your own with your family, or maybe there's an apple orchard in your community that you could check out in person too. I want to just tell you a couple things to have on your radar, teachers. We are hosting a Farm to School book week next week. So on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'll have 2 readers, guest readers each day, and you can join, and the readers will read a book and the students can ask them questions, and we hope it's a really fun experience and event. We also have our Ag Mag magazines. Here's an example. This is the 6th grade version, but we have issues for each grade level: kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. And those are free to order. So however many students are in your class, you can order that number and we'll send them to you, the print copies, or also the content is available digitally on our Ag Mag website. And also we have our agriculture literacy grants open right now. So teachers, you can apply for up to $500 project that you'd like some extra funds to do in your classroom or take a field trip or something like that. So check the link, we just shared it. And then finally, we have an Outstanding Teacher Award. So if you have been doing some cool agriculture things in your classroom and want to share that information, go for that. You can fill out that application and we'll pick one winner who receives $500 and also gets to travel with us to Orlando, Florida for the National Ag in the Classroom Conference in June. So our time is up, it's 10:30, and we hope that you have a fantastic Thursday and enjoy some apples this fall. Thanks, everybody. We hope to see you in November. We're going to go on a virtual field trip to a turkey farm. So stay tuned for more details. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.